I'm doing well. Carolyn, nice
Liz
to
and
see you.
Carolyn, both wearing blue. It's
Oh,
always
yeah.
so fun to see if we're going to match, clash, or like complement one another. I think we've done so well so far. It's just
Yeah.
going to be a
Well,
surprise every time.
that's right. I love surprises.
How are you today? I mean, sometimes I'm expecting your dad to like come around the corner, but he just never does.
Well, he might one day.
He might one
He
day.
might. You never know.
Do you tell
Yeah.
him you're filming, or what do you do?
Yeah, I usually do. I usually do. He tries to stay away out of my way when I'm working. You know,
Yeah.
he's got
Yeah.
his own routine.
As men do. Like, I can't imagine my husband wanting to stick around here, like listening to what we're talking about. Like, literally no interest at all.
Yeah.
Bless his
Yeah.
heart. Bless his
Yeah.
heart.
My dad's same. Yeah. Plus his hearing's really bad, so,
Oh, perfect.
right?
Well, today we're going to talk about the Guilt and Shame Cafe, another stop in your Victimtown metaphor or analogy that you've used. And I was hoping that we could turn to page 72. And below the middle of it, we've got some signposts here. If you could read the first and second paragraph, for people watching us, like Liz doesn't know ever what we're going to talk about. I mean, she knows that I'm sort of loosely following the chapters of the book, and also I have a list of topics I can talk about. So sometimes I weave the topics in. Last episode was your boob job. I'm sorry. Never ever
Yeah,
said
and we
my
didn't really
favorite
get
word.
into much about that, just
We
that
didn't,
it
but
happened.
you talk about so much stuff in this book, though, like the underlying storyline. I mean, it's your time at the place and how you came to understand how to work through and integrate trauma from childhood to some extent. But then we've got this underlying storyline, people that are new, of when you were 6 and your aunt was 19, she disappeared, and then 5 years later was found, the remains of her body was found. And that is every child's nightmare, period. But every child's nightmare, especially in the 60s and 70s when I grew up, like that was our nightmare. And so you've got that, but you talk about so many other things too. Like I'm not saying nothing's off limits, but there's a lot that you have delved into and shared about your life. And so it's been a delight to get to know you, and to talk about some of these things, because I love talking about everything. I'll talk about almost everything. So you talk about boob job. I don't have a boob job, but I've thought about it, and so the things that you talk about, we talked about menopause, we made a menopause joke and that kind of thing. It's kind of a delight, because here we are in our 50 and 60s, and there's a lot of young voices out there these days. And let's talk about the repercussions of being 25 and 30 at 50 and 61.
Right?
What
Yeah,
you think you know
we've
then,
got a
and
few tips for them, I suppose. And at the same time, they all have to figure it out on their
yeah,
own in their own time.
yeah.
So, yeah, shit goes down in our childhoods that we definitely need to unpack and heal, and we can't ever stop it from happening. So the
Yeah.
shitstorms still arrive
Gonna
throughout
keep
our
coming up.
lives. They,
Exactly.
you know, you never know when.
Oh,
So makes
exactly.
sense. Yeah, to be better
Well,
responders.
yeah, sorry, I keep interrupting you. How rude.
That's so good.
Sorry. And that's one of the things I want to talk about today, because I just apologized. And yeah, let's talk about guilt and shame. So can you read to us from page 72, halfway down?
Okay. Always busy. The Guilt and Shame Cafe has multiple seating options. The maitre d' evaluates the patrons and decides where each guest will dine. But the maitre d' isn't the only one to have an opinion about our status. The other people hanging out in Victimtown usually have something to say about it too. Some of them are our friends, and on occasion, we let them help decide which section suits us. Everyone in the cafe feels bad. Exchanging sympathetic looks, we make small talk and share the nitty-gritty of our wrongdoings, our huge mistakes, and the terrible things that are totally our fault. We commiserate. We're very, very sorry. We're always sorry because everything is our fault. The chair seats are soft and flimsy, and we sink down until our shoulders are level with the tables.
Okay. So, and then you go on and you describe it more and in more detail, and people can just buy the book to find out what you say. But I thought that that was a good little snippet of an introduction to the Guilt and Shame Cafe, because guilt and shame drives us so much. What did you learn about the guilt and shame at your time at the place and over your readings, and how you've incorporated it into your life?
Yeah, it's a tough one because more than most of the other places, the the Guilt and Shame Cafe gets right down to our core. It affects us on our deepest level. You know, we when we're there and we believe the voice, so the maitre d is that other voice in our head that's opposing our heart voice. The maitre d is that loud voice in our head that berates us for not only the terrible things that we've done, but more than that, it can become that we are terrible people, that what we've done is unforgivable, that we are not worth anything, that our lives are not worth anything, that we have no value. That's the extent to which the shame can take hold. And it's a real from, well, everything is from the inside out thing. But the shame is just so toxic, you know, which is how and why I've related it to food. Uh, it gets in there and it affects us on a literally on a cellular level. It can make us very, very sick.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
What was one of the biggest ways it was showing up for you before you went to the place?
Ah, for me, it was about being weak, weak and pathetic and afraid. You know, it also was a bit about my age and how much of my life I had already lived, and I hadn't figured it out yet.
Mm.
And so that was shameful for me, that I'd raised my kids from the mindset of the unhealed childhood trauma.
Mm.
I had I had some big, you know, regrets and shameful feelings about the impact that that had. Um, yeah,
So that's interesting, because we've talked before and we've said this before, that in our parenting especially, and there's going to be a lot of parents that will understand what we're saying, because I don't think there's any parent that thinks like, oh, I've done a great job, period, end of story, you know what I mean? And even the parents that are, anyway, it doesn't matter. I won't go into what I was going to say, but how how do you change your life and change how you're viewing things, and still be like, you're still a mom to your boys who are now adults,
yep, yep.
and they are potentially recreating you as you were and not as you are now. Mom did that, mom's like that, blah blah blah, and not seeing is now. Like, how do you deal with the guilt and shame of something that happened 30 years ago, 25 years ago, 20 years ago?
Yeah, well, I
No.
think it's a little bit different for each of us, and it's also a little bit different depending on what that event or situation was that happened back then.
Mhm.
But I think in to bring it all together, it's first of all giving ourselves the grace and the space to recognize that we and everybody always is doing the best we can or we could with the resources we had available at that time. And by resources, I mean not just the physical things like other people to help or money or things, but also our sense of self-worth, also our time, our energy, our knowledge, all of those resources. And the biggest resource is our heart voice power. And when we recognize that when we did things or things happened that we inevitably were ashamed about, things were not easy for us. You know, we didn't have the heart voice power. We didn't have the understanding. We didn't love ourselves. We didn't have the voice, the boundaries, the knowledge to do any better. And you can't change it. So to give yourself some grace for whatever happened, what it was, and to take steps wherever it makes sense or it's appropriate to make amends and express your heartfelt apology and to do better, to learn from it and to do better. I mean, that's all we can do. Some people have made really, I don't know what the adjective is, mistakes or have done things that are hard to live with, you know, and my heart goes out to them. But you can't change things that have happened, and we can do what we can to make amends and forge a new life with that knowledge, and to show ourselves first and foremost, and then secondly the world, that we're better than that we've learned, that we've evolved, and to move on. Right, when we're stuck in that, it serves no one. Yeah, it's a tough one. It's, of all the places in Victimtown, well, the Sorrow Swampland is also a really difficult one. But the Guilt and Shame Cafe, I think, more than any other place, has the capacity for a real long-lasting mental health problems.
Well, when you look at, like, I wrote down some of the words that you were using in describing it, right? So these are some synonyms: feeling bad, denial, regret, guilt, shame, judgment. You talked about our deficiencies, self-loathing, dishonor, how we berate ourselves. Like, it's quite judgment-filled language where you're attached to, right?
Yep.
And I think that's really interesting because I had this idea pop into my mind, and it was something that I learned sort of like near the end of my time at church, which was retributive justice versus restorative justice, which is all like law language, right? Like, we're using judgment language when we're doing this, right? So then instead of just describing it, because I'm going to do about poor job, I just looked up what does Google say. Retributive justice focuses on assigning consequences to those individuals who have committed a crime. Restorative justice focuses on repairing the harm done by the perpetrator and building the person's relationship with the victim in society. And so I was thinking about how, to some extent, the ego, which is part of the, I'm assuming you're saying that the ego is part of the guilt and shame, that voice or whatever. It is meant to restore and to move us to where we're meant to go quickly. We're not supposed to be stuck for very long, but we just stay and it grows and grows. And then it becomes this retributive justice. You deserve to feel bad. You deserve this. You deserve that, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then it grows so big that we're not listening to the heart voice. And so, since you're using an analogy of a cafe, I was thinking, oh, it's like overeating at a buffet. The heart voice is just meant to be light and everything else. And we just before this, we started filming, I asked you a question, and we can maybe just talk about it because I think it's a good analogy. I said to you at the end of the book, the very last chapter, you said, eating at the guilt and shame cafe will either make us healthier or make us very, very sick, depending on where we sit and what we eat. And that kind of ties into what you were saying about, because I said, well, how is it healthy? How is guilt and shame healthy? That doesn't make sense. But your description really follows the analogy of what I'm saying to some extent. And I would love for you to go into it. How do we keep that monster of guilt and shame from growing and keep it so where it's just supposed to bring us to our heart voice so that we're listening to it, right? As soon as we get the little warning light, boom, we move to the heart voice, and then we can dig into what the heart knows best. How do we do that, and what's healthy about it?
It's easier said than done, of course, as all conceptual, emotional, human growth things are.
Yeah.
But firstly, I think it's important for our listeners to know that all the places in Victimtown have gifts to offer. It's not a bad thing to stop into any of those places for a short amount of time. It's where we go when we're not quite ready to process and to deal with the pain and the hard feelings. Sometimes we have to gear up a little bit for that, or we have to get into an environment conducive for us to be able to do that, you know. And in the interim where we're hanging out at one of those places in Victimtown, like the Guilt and Shame Cafe, as long as we don't get stuck there, that's when the real problems arise. But to hang out there for a short amount of time, it sets the stage. It's the awareness piece, and that's one of the beautiful things about naming these places, is that the voice in our head that starts saying those things helps us become aware. Oh crap, I'm listening to that shitty voice. That's the maitre d' making me feel like I am a total asshole, unworthy, terrible person because I said or did something that I feel really bad about. Okay, like on a fairly not hugely life altering level. And when we have that awareness, we can hang out there, and I liken it to the outdoor patio of the Guilt and Shame Cafe, where they serve healthier portions, healthier food. We can't hear the maitre d' inside nearly as loudly. We just need a little bit of time to gather our wits and figure out how we're going to overcome this, how we're going to make amends. We need a plan to make it right, and we need to give ourselves some grace and rewrite the story. So when we can rewrite that story, then that maitre d' no longer has any power over us. It's not, the maitre d' can't come out to the patio and drag us to the back room and condemn us to a private booth, where nobody wants to see us, and we just don't deserve anything good. I lost my track.
The outside, that the outside is meant to just to stop in, to stop in, and to bring you
to bring us to the awareness to rewrite our stories. So we always have a choice how we think about something. We have a choice about the meaning we attach to it, and the story that we tell ourselves, and the story that we tell other people, right? And it's not that I'm not talking about denying that something happened, and I'm not talking about excusing it, and I'm not talking about blaming someone else for it. The story always has to be truthful and honest and accept responsibility for our actions and our words. So here's an example. The Victimtown version of this scenario would be something like, I got so triggered by that asshole, what he said, that I punched a hole in the wall, and he's lucky I didn't punch him in the face.
Yep.
Versus, I'm not proud of how triggered I got and the response that I had, and I'm working on better responses, and I'm going to make amends, and I vow to do better next time. Right? I mean, we can't change what happened, but there's a story that feels better to own. And depending on what it is and where we're at with our journey, it could take 4 or 5 iterations of that story to really get there and keep us completely out of the back room at the Guilt and Shame Cafe. And that's okay. As our heart voice strengthens, those new iterations will grow, and we become better. It's where we learn our life lessons at all the places in Victimtown. So that's the gift, right? If we never landed there, then we'd just be bopping along the surface, right?
Yeah. So I cannot remember if I said this in the previous episode or not. If I talked, I know I told you this story, but I don't know if I told you the story on camera or not. Oh well, I'm going to tell it again. So I'm doing this morning Zoom call with a friend, and we're reading through a book, and we're challenging one another through the book that we're reading. And I was reading and I apologized for slowing down for a second because I wanted to highlight something. And I guess I do that all the time. I apologize. I'm sorry. 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 All the time.
Yeah,
And I
you're not
didn't
alone.
recognize that I was doing it. And so my friend said, there's something that bugs me about it. And let me just say, like, what are you sorry for? Like, why are you
Mm,
apologizing? And this is part of the great friends that I have that want to point out something that is actually hurting me, that's not serving my purpose or whatever else, right? And that was actually a hard one to hear because I wasn't prepared to hear it, but and then I was like, oh crap, I am. You'd think it was an easy one. It's like not a big deal, but it was just like, oh, I'm not perfect. Oh, I'm not perfect. Great. I thought it was better than that. I'm studying this high level book with you, and we're deciphering it. And I really had to start thinking and catching myself at how often I say I'm sorry. And then I went to another friend and I said, she's a former psychotherapist, and she's part of this channeling world that I love so much. I met her at a workshop years ago, not years ago, last year. And so I asked her, I'm like, hey, I say this thing. What could I say instead of I'm sorry? And she said, well, when you're saying I'm sorry, you're claiming I am. Anything after I am, you are claiming. So you're claiming your state of sorriness. And so you could say I apologize or whatever else, or just do what you need to do without even saying it at all. And it's been such a practice in not feeling sorry for something that actually isn't really affecting somebody else, but
right.
but being in a state of sorriness. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's in a
I know
this
exactly what you
perpetual,
mean.
do you get it? Yeah, this like you're just in this perpetual state of like, I'm sorry for my existence. I'm sorry. Like, fuck. How many times do I say it? Do I need to say it? And I really, really appreciated it. That was a huge, huge lesson for me. And part of the reason why I'm doing this morning call with my friend is for that very thing, to put into practice the things that we're learning. And it was right in my face where I had to really evaluate with somebody. And I don't know her that well. So it's a new
Mhm.
friend too. And you're just like, oh, damn. But that's okay because who I am as a person is divine and glorious and all those things that are true about me. I've just in that moment forgotten that. And so it's a cutting off, which has led to those things. That's my take on it. But to be able to re-see myself in a different way and to allow a friend to correct me to some extent and maintain a non-judgmental thing about that friend and about me is such a beautiful gift both ways. So it's
Absolutely.
re-knowing the situation too, right? And you talked about this, that even re-knowing situations that seemed terrible at the time, if you can have a little bit of grace and listen to your heart voice, like you say, you can re-know a situation through your heart voice with so much more love and grace and forgiveness than you could if you were just listening to that guilt and shame and that ego just pounding on you all the time. And I think that's what you're talking about with the heart voice, like listening. And so again, um, how do we strengthen that heart voice so that it's coming through and we're being more gentle with ourselves as we're making these transitions? Because you're like a baby. I'm still saying I'm sorry, but I'm catching myself. The awareness is coming in more often now, which is one thing that we talked about, which is what we're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot in there.
Sorry, I just
And
said
just,
15 things.
I know, so great. Firstly, I just wanted to say that you are so not alone in that tendency. It's ingrained in our culture and our upbringing. I think as women globally, that's a thing. And as Canadians, that's a
That we're known
thing,
to be extra play. Sorry,
right?
sorry. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry. Um, and to approach it from perhaps a gratitude. So I loved how you said that you owned that state, that I am sorry, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes we might have something technically, maybe loosely, to be a little bit sorry for, but we can always rephrase that with a, I don't know, it sounds overused, but with a gratitude. For example, if if you're late, if you're running late for something, and I'm a stickler for being on time. And I will always leave lots of leeway for whatever might happen in the interim. I'm generally early for everything.
Yeah.
But shit happens, right? And I will text if I can or call, running 10 minutes late. And I used to say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I'm late. And one of the rephrasing that I've done is now I'll say, thank you. Thank you for your patience. It wasn't my fucking fault that there was a car accident on the highway and I was stuck in traffic for a half an hour.
Yeah.
So why am I sorry? I'm not, I'm sorry that they had to wait for me because that's not a nice thing to do, but it's not my fault. And so the thank you, it just has a whole different energy around it. Thank you for your patience, right? As together, we're sorry for whoever is in a car accident.
Yeah.
That's who we're really sorry for. And that also is not our fault, right? So sometimes that's an appropriate response.
I will say though, I was slightly running behind for our meeting today, right? And so I popped on right on time, but then I'm like, oh crap, my back's so itchy. I'm sorry. I keep itching my back through these couple episodes we're taping, and I'm like, my back's so itchy. So I was feeling embarrassed that I wasn't prepared the way I wanted to be prepared. And I didn't say I'm sorry. I did say sorry a couple times, 3 times, I think, with you. And I actually was aware of myself saying, sorry. And you're like, it's okay. But had I come in with a little less fluster and a little more confidence and been like, I appreciate you waiting for me. I need to go print this thing up or do what I need to do before. But it's that
awareness.
insecurity
The awareness is
like,
the first step.
But it's also like, I'm thinking, what is Liz? I don't know you that well, right? So it's like, I want to impress you. I don't want to waste your time. And I was aware that it was my lack of planning that caused this, not an accident. And I think
guess what? You're human. You're human.
I'm human too.
But the voice in our head is thinking, what does she think of me? Now she thinks I'm disorganized. Now she thinks I'm unprofessional. And it's, but that's just a story.
Yeah.
It's a story that we make up. And we don't know that. And it was a one of,
Yeah.
So things that are habitual and recurring are different.
Yeah. And hopefully you won't see that in me, right? Like, it's with you. I've been brutally honest in with like where I'm at, right? Because I'm like, I got to start this relationship out like just to be completely myself. And you've been very, very generous at allowing this relationship to unfold so beautifully, right? Like just with any relationship. And I'm still getting to re-know myself after these 3 years and trying to still figure out who, like I pretty much know who I am, but now living that unashamedly is like coming out of the closet. It's like re-knowing. I've heard
it's
3 times.
It's a big coming out thing. But if we don't come out from the very fucking beginning and be ourselves, then the entire relationship is built on a false foundation.
Right.
And how do you do take backs on that? It's like, I know we went for this walk in the woods and we've been doing it every day for a week, but I fucking hate walking in the woods. Right.
Yeah.
How do you ever come back and then really be yourself when you've not been presenting yourself truthfully?
That's exactly.
And then you're covering up, and then it's just a whole.
Yeah.
You can't ever have intimacy or connection if that's the way you start, right? So it's like, I can't take that back now, right? Like I'm going to look like a total idiot.
It's so true. But like we are, and I think it's important to recognize we are all in a continual state of evolvement. There's a few weeks ago, I just was listening to Gwen Stefani's song "Let Me Reintroduce Myself," and then also Jay-Z's got a song where he goes like, "Allow me to reintroduce myself," and that's in the last couple days I've heard 2 people say those very things. I saw an Instagram post, one of my Instagram friends talked about reintroducing herself as she's re-knowing herself, and then my friend earlier today said it too, like, oh, let me reintroduce myself. I was just thought, wow, it's so interesting that there's this theme of people people just wanting to fucking take off the success suit and the mask. It's like we put on this success suit every single day. I've heard this term from Michael Wells. He's passed away now. He's one of my earlier mentors, but we put on this success suit and we hop around, like imagine like a bunny outfit. We hop around all day and then we get home and we take off the success suit, and then our family gets the real us, which is usually the leftovers of us,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah,
just why not just maybe not put the success suit on in the beginning anyway? Let's just be who we are fully, but we're so afraid of being known, but partly that's because we don't know ourselves that well,
exactly. And as we
right?
get to know ourselves better and then love ourselves, and then we want to reintroduce ourselves to the world.
Mm-hmm. And
And
that's
this,
scary.
it's really scary, and it
Hmm.
can happen multiple times throughout our lives as we evolve and we become different people. And that's when some of the people in our world are not going to jive with the new version, the reintroduced version of ourselves. It's no longer going to be the right fit for them, and that's okay, because there's going to be a whole lot of other people that we haven't even met yet
Mm,
that are going to be a the right fit and a better fit, uh, because we're being more truthful.
yeah. Yeah. I think the problem
Yeah,
we can run into a little bit is the feeling of the rejection on either end of that, right? Which
yeah,
then is still a victim town thing too. It's just there on your shoulder to push you through to your heart voice to listen to what your heart's saying
yeah,
about
yeah.
that
But it's
thing.
hard. Rejection hurts. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
there's you gotta feel the hurt,
yeah,
and you gotta put it in perspective and let it go with love. Um, but it's sucky.
yeah, totally. One of the things you say near the end of the chapter, and you just have such a good line. I love this line. So you talked about the detective and the police that were working really so hard on Linda's case for so many years that involved so many people, blah blah blah. And the detective Dennis Alsop. Did I say his name
I think
correctly?
so.
Alsop?
Yeah, Aesop, Allsup. Yeah,
Alsop.
I'm not entirely sure.
And that even after this detective
Mm,
finished his career and was retired, he was still working on his unsolved cases. I'm gonna cry when I say this. It just,
I know.
it's, he probably actually had a passion for it too. It not only bothered him, but he probably actually enjoyed doing that because it's what he knew very well. I'm just assuming, as I'm just thinking about why would someone do that, right? But one of the things that you talk about is after he passed away, his son found the boxes, and his son said, I'm going to try not to cry when I say this because I feel tears coming on. He left this stuff and he left it intentionally. He never forgot it was here. Like he was wanting to
Yeah,
just help these families of these there's
yeah,
three cases here. And the last line it says, Victimtown isn't only where victims of crimes end up. Detectives spend time there too. Like,
right.
it's like everybody, like not every, I'm
I
not going to say
know.
everybody. A few choice few people have learned not to be like that, but it doesn't. It really is everybody. It doesn't matter how well educated you have, how you are, how much money you have. It doesn't matter if you're old or young or whatever else. You're your mom or you're a kid. We are all spending time there.
Yeah, yeah. And the detectives, like everyone, were doing the best that they could with the
Mhm.
resources they had available, you know? And I mean, she went missing in 1968. They didn't have DNA technology. They didn't have security cameras. They didn't have databases. They didn't have a fraction of what they used to solve and the crimes today. Right?
Mhm.
They had their wits. They had their intuition. They had their work ethic and their procedures, and they had to answer to the families. You know, and that just now I'm gonna cry. That could not have been an easy role in any way. The desperation for answers.
Yeah. The
from the
frustration that would have come
families.
over family and the vitriol that would
Mhm.
have naturally just been an
Yeah,
outpouring from this a person to the detective would have been like, why aren't
right?
you doing your job? Why haven't you found them yet?
Yes,
Are you sleeping? Are you
yes.
doing all like just yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if my family uttered words like that, it would have been understandable. I'm not excusing it, and I really don't know, but you know, the detectives have their own maitre d' on their shoulder, saying, you know, it's your job. You have to find this. You have to find their little girl, right? I mean, what an ominous responsibility to have an expectation to live up to, and how difficult it would be to overcome that voice in their own head when they weren't able to do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And yeah, so this particular detective had all of his notes, and even in retirement was working, still working for three unsolved cases in his career, and he had a incredible career where he was able to solve so many cases and provide answers and closure to so many families. And yet, you know, there were just three that he never gave up on.
Wow. Ah,
Yeah.
well,
So, you know, it's easy to be judgmental and critical of people from the sidelines, but we never know what's going on in someone else's head, you know. And some listeners might not be ready for this, but I will also add that not only do detectives spend time in Victimtown, but so do perpetrators. Because the people that do these terrible, mean-spirited, life-changing acts, they are in as much pain themselves. And I'm not excusing their behavior. I'm just offering um, a heartfelt, compassionate lens. I don't, nobody's, well, there may be, I don't know, some rare genetic, you know, anomalies that are born, but I don't think humans are born with propensity to be evil. We are
yeah,
all
we
born, we're born full of love,
yeah.
and our journey is to come back to that. And the people that have done heinous crimes or made not even crimes, not premeditated, not even all the time, sometimes just massive mistakes, you know, are reaching down to grab your cup of coffee, and you get in a car accident, not paying attention, or drunk driving, or there's a million different examples, you know, of good people that make a terrible mistake
Yeah, I totally,
and have to live with it.
yeah, my arms are crossing now, and we're gonna, yeah, I don't want to
Oh,
get into this too much. No, 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 I'm not defensive, but I'm like,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
no, because
It's hard.
this is my contemplation thing. Because
Yes,
do you
yes.
remember, was it Mario Marco or whatever? He killed that family of like, he was drunk driving. He's from that really wealthy
Oh,
family, and
yes.
drunk driving. He killed the
Three
three children in
children
the
and the
family.
grandparents or something. Yeah,
Yeah,
just oh,
and
tragic,
you
tragic.
know, when you read the news and stuff, there was a lot of like, oh, he was privileged, he got off the plane, he did this, and he's got privilege, and da, 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 da. But when you actually just stop and think about this human being,
Yeah,
he did something that was terrible, of course. Or even the Humboldt, remember the Humboldt
yeah,
crash with the yeah. But this is a man, and these are people who did not wake up in the morning thinking that they were going to kill someone or thinking that they were going to do something bad. You know, I know
yeah,
that there are serial killers, you know, Jeffrey Dahmer or whatever, um but all of us have forgotten who we are. And when I think of the things that I've done, and I'm like, I've done some things that, like, I haven't killed anybody, but things that you feel so ashamed about.
yeah. We all have.
I want people to see me and just my humanness, and I'm like, I was just hurting and I didn't know how to do better at the time, you
Yeah,
know. And at that moment, somebody that has done that, even in drunk driving, like, this is still a human being, this is still somebody's child. He
yep,
still has to be devastated, you know. And of
Yeah.
course, there are people who are not devastated, that have so completely cut themselves off from who they are that they don't even remember that there was any spark of goodness in them. But grace, I can have grace for and compassion for others because that's not only been bestowed upon me, but like I've needed that. I've changed myself and I have done better. And it's like, shish, I just wish that
Yeah.
we could receive. It doesn't mean that the people that I've hurt in the past need to be my friends again, and I don't expect them to be.
Yep.
But again, like to re-see and to re-know in a new light is
Yep.
often, hard, and it's
But we
harder for
can't,
some
yeah,
than others.
yes, it is absolutely. And the thing is, though, we don't have the capacity to do that toward other people until we have first done that for ourselves.
Yeah,
So that's the work, and that's the responsibility. Um, you know, what happened when we were kids is not our fault, but it's absolutely our responsibility to deal with it
yeah,
and to heal from it and to love ourselves without limits or conditions so
mm,
that we can then love the other humans on this planet. and
love
and
that.
that I think is what will change the world if people focus on themselves, heal their own shit, learn to love themselves and be who they truly are, then then they can extend that outward. But
Mm.
we can't have that non-judgment, we can't for someone else until we can first do it for ourselves.
And so there is a hint. If you are judgmental upon other people, perhaps we need to look at ourselves first, because you are doing that to yourself first and foremost. And that's the thing that's
Right.
saddening too. It's not just
Yeah.
that I have judgment for that person, it's that that's coming back on me so much more.
Yeah.
So I'm doing it to myself already.
Yeah. And that learning never ends. And
Constant.
right, it is. And when we choose to ignore it and push it aside, I'm telling you from experience that we're only going to be presented with a bigger, bolder, more in our face opportunity to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Yeah. And so before I ask you your questions, I just wanted to remind people, because I'm reminding myself of this, is that that guilt and shame voice, and whether it's could be guilt, shame, control, ego for the most part, can be very loud. And so to hear your heart voice, it's usually that second voice that's like right under the heart, your loud voice, and it's the one that's kind and sweet and gentle and gracious and loving and compassionate. And it's hard to believe that voice sometimes when we're in so much pain. We think we should punish ourselves, but it's really, like as you say, doing the work and moving into that heart voice and really truly understanding who you are, that really helps us move
Yeah.
forward. That's part of that integrative work, because it's not just enough to read your book, because you could read all the books in the world. You could
Mm.
go to all, like I said this about our friend Deb's book about long-term care now, and it doesn't do you any good just to read a book about long-term care. You have to implement the things to create new relationships and new dynamics with yourself and with
Always.
people, right? So
Yeah. Yes. And so part 3 of the book for our listeners is strategies and works through how to stand up to all the voices at the places in Victimtown and how to strengthen our heart voice.
amazing.
Requires an understanding first of all the different places in Victimtown.
Yeah.
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 So, and if you don't get the book, you're fucked until we get to that taping. And then other than that, you're going to be fine. Hold on.
Yeah.
Go to sleep and go to sleep until we can get there. That was great advice the other day. You're like, when I'm really stressed, you just go to sleep and
Just
cut
go to
that
sleep. Yeah. Day's
thought
over.
process.
Can't do anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
Call
Yeah.
it. Just call it.
Yeah. Okay, here, let's do some questions and then we're going to sign off. And I just grabbed these questions from the internet. So I'm trying to rephrase this first one to make more sense. But the question is, are you a motorcycle rider? But I think I would rather ask, because I don't think you are. Do you like riding on motorcycles? How do you feel about motorcycles?
No, no, not even a little bit. I
No.
don't have that that thrill seeking gene. And I think they're I think they're very risky, incredibly dangerous. No,
Mm,
not
that's a
me.
no. Okay, we'll
No,
not be doing
hard
that.
no.
Do you possess any musical instrument playing experience?
No. I My mother wanted me to learn piano. When we moved into my grandparents' house, my mother's piano was still there, and she was a very accomplished piano player. I think she even taught piano. And I had about a week of sitting beside her while she tried to teach me, and she deemed me tone deaf, and that was the end of that. And the next day, the piano was sold.
Oh, jeepers.
So that was the end of anything musical for me. But I do love and enjoy listening to music.
Nice. Night music. Nice. Okay. And the last one, we're just gonna ask three. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
Historical figure. Eleanor Roosevelt.
Oh, how come?
She said some really great things, and I think that she was a woman well ahead of her time. And I'd be curious to learn more about how that was for her
Hmm,
experiences
I
in
love
the
that.
world at that time. Yeah, I imagine she had a very strong heart voice.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Mine would be Jesus for sure. I'd be like, listen, we got some shit to sort out here. Is this just like the way, is that what
Wow.
you meant? Anyway, thank you for
Yeah,
reading this.
that's a big thing.
That's a big one. I think Jesus would
That's a
decline
big
that.
one.
Jesus would
Yeah.
decline that invitation, being like, no, you guys screwed it up enough.
Hey. Yeah,
Anyway,
maybe, I don't know.
and we just lost all the Christian viewers. If we had any Christian viewers, now they're gone. I don't mean to be rude. I've just deconstructed. Anyway, and I do think actually I'm gonna really follow this up because now I'm gonna have a vulnerability hangover. I actually think it would be a cool conversation to sit with Jesus and be like,
Of
okay,
course it would.
let's
Yes.
get some clarification on some things here so that we can all get ourselves sorted out.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Well, you're
Yeah.
thinking on a much bigger scale than I was, and I'd be interested in that combo too.
Well, yeah. Well, you know what? Because one of the things that really tripped me up as my church years, I can look back now in a reframed way and say it really was a beautiful experience. There were many things that really shaped me in a really lovely way and a great, for me, safe-ish place to be. However, the whole, um, yeah, the some of the legalism that I could have done without, and that's on me too. So,
Yep.
yeah. Anyway,
Was another perfect example of how our childhoods shape us, right?
yeah.
So that was yours. And the reason that didn't even come up on my radar when you asked that question is I went to Sunday school for a couple years, but I was 6 when Linda disappeared. And at church, my parents just found it overwhelming. The minister would comment about it, and prayers for Linda. And is there any news? And has she been found? Are there any new leads? And all of the other people at church would come up to my parents and with love and well wishes. But it became a place that was too painful for them to go, and so we stopped. And I was in a church maybe 3 times
Wow.
until I was like 21. I haven't been in a church more than a dozen times in my life.
Wow. It's so
So
interesting, because as you say that, all of that, I can picture the congregation and friends doing that, and of
yeah,
course with all sweetness and love,
yes,
right? But it
yes,
was
yeah,
just a painful reminder again and
yeah,
again and again, right? Like it's just a
yeah. It
painful
was just too
reminder.
much.
And,
Yeah,
for the most part, like I think of my husband's brother when he passed away. My father-in-law is a pastor, and so lots of love and outpouring and support. But there was a finite amount of time that went on, or when someone, you know what I mean.
right.
Whereas yours just lasted for like it would just be for like those questions all the time. And where's the
Yeah,
reprieve? Where's the reprieve?
there was none. So they just avoided it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Well, thank you so much.
Great episode.
Wonderful.
We'll see you again
Wonderful
soon.
too. Yep.
Okay.
Take care. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.